She scrubbed their floors. She emptied their trash. She was invisible to them. So when they invited her to the wedding of the year, she knew exactly what it was, a trap. They wanted to humiliate her. They wanted her to be the joke. But here's what they didn't know. The woman they were trying to embarrass used to be the most powerful woman in the room, and she was about to remind them, stay with me. You know, sometimes people invite you places not because they want you there, but because they want to laugh at you. That's what happened to Grace. And before we dive in, I want you to think about this. Have you ever been made to feel small? Like you didn't matter? Well, this story is for you. Grace Anderson was 42 years old. She worked as a janitor in one of those fancy office buildings in downtown Chicago. The kind with marble floors so shiny you could see your reflection. The kind where people wore $1,000 suits and talked about million-dollar deals. Grace cleaned those floors. She wiped those windows. She emptied those trash cans. And most days, people walked right past her like she was invisible, like she was part of the furniture. She had rough hands. Hands that told a story of hard work and sacrifice. Her back was always straight, even when she was tired, even when her feet hurt, even when her heart was heavy. She knew every corner of that building, every stain on every carpet, every secret whispered in every hallway. Because here's the truth. When people think you're nobody, they forget you have ears. They forget you're even human. But there was one person who never let Grace forget her place. Her name was Brittany. Brittany Cole. She was young, beautiful, and engaged to the CEO of the company. Her heels cost more than Grace's monthly rent. Her makeup was always perfect. Her smile was ice cold. One time, Brittany looked down at Grace scrubbing the floor and said, "Careful with that spot. This marble costs more than your entire life." Grace swallowed the insult. She needed that job. Bills don't care about your pride. Life doesn't stop just because someone hurts your feelings. But on this particular day, something felt different. Brittany was walking toward her with a group of friends, all dressed like they owned the world. And Brittany was holding something in her hand, a cream-colored envelope with gold trim. Grace stepped aside like she always did. She didn't want trouble, but trouble found her anyway. "Grace," Brittany called out, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "I haven't seen you much lately. Hiding from me?" Grace didn't answer. She just gripped her cleaning rag a little tighter. Brittany held up the envelope and smiled that dangerous smile. "I have something special for you. A surprise." She pulled out a wedding invitation. Thick, expensive paper. Gold lettering. The kind of invitation Grace had never received in her life. "Here you go," Brittany said. Her friends already starting to giggle. "It's an invitation to my wedding. Me and David are getting married this Saturday at the Rosewood Manor. And guess what? You're invited." Grace froze. A wedding invitation? To their wedding? She looked at the envelope, then at Brittany, and that's when she understood. This wasn't kindness. This was cruelty wrapped in gold paper. "Wear anything you like," Brittany continued, her smile growing wider. "Just maybe not your work uniform. We don't want people thinking you're there to clean up." Her friends burst into laughter. One of them added, "Or maybe she can help wash dishes after dinner." More laughter. Grace felt heat rise to her face. Her chest tightened. But she didn't cry. She didn't bow her head. She looked Brittany straight in the eye and said two simple words. "Thank you." Brittany looked surprised for just a second. Then Grace turned and walked away, holding that envelope like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Later that evening, Grace sat in her small apartment, 3 flights up because the elevator had been broken for weeks. She sat on her bed and looked at that invitation. The gold letters sparkled under her lamp. "You are cordially invited to the wedding of Brittany Cole and David Richardson. Saturday, 5 p.m., Rosewood Manor. Black tie. Black tie. That meant expensive gowns, high heels, jewelry, things Grace didn't own, things she couldn't afford. She finally understood completely. This wasn't an invitation. It was a trap, a public humiliation. They wanted her to show up looking poor and out of place, so all their rich friends would laugh at her. They wanted to make her the joke of the evening. Grace felt tears coming. For the first time in years, she let them fall. She cried for all the insults. She cried for all the years of being invisible. She cried for feeling like she didn't matter. But then her eyes landed on a picture hanging on her wall. It was old and faded, but she could still see her mother's face clearly. Strong eyes, warm smile, simple dress. Her mother used to say, "Baby, dignity isn't something people give you. It's something you carry inside. Even when the whole world tells you you're nothing, you know who you are." Grace stood up and walked to her closet. In the back, behind old clothes and boxes, she pulled out a small wooden chest. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside were photographs, but not photographs of this life. In these pictures, Grace looked different, confident, happy, dressed beautifully, standing with community leaders, cutting ribbons at charity events. There was also a certificate. The edges were worn, but the name was still bold and clear. Grace Anderson, founder and executive director, Anderson Community Foundation. Grace touched her own name and closed her eyes. That was her. That was real. Her father had owned 3 successful businesses in Detroit. He'd mentored young people, built youth centers, given people second chances. Her mother was a beloved teacher. Grace had grown up with purpose, with love, with respect. She'd gone to college, started a foundation, helped hundreds of kids go to school. People once looked up to her, until everything fell apart. Money stolen by someone she trusted, court cases, debt, shame, then losing both her parents within 2 years. Everything disappeared. Her home, her car, her foundation, her reputation. All gone. All she had left was survival. And sometimes surviving means becoming invisible. Grace looked at those photos for a long time. Then she picked up her phone. Her hand hovered over a contact she hadn't called in 5 years. A name she'd been too ashamed to reach out to. Rachel Porter, her best friend from college. A fashion designer who'd moved to New York and built an empire. Grace pressed call. Her heart pounded. The phone rang once. Twice. Then, "Hello." The voice sounded shocked. "Grace? Grace Anderson? Oh my God, is that really you?" Grace closed her eyes. A tear rolled down her cheek. "It's me, Rachel. I need help. And I think it's time the world remembers who I really am." The next morning, a black SUV pulled up in front of Grace's apartment building. The door opened, and out stepped Rachel Porter. Sharp, elegant, powerful, sunglasses covering half her face, a perfectly tailored blazer, heels that clicked against the pavement with authority. When she saw Grace standing there in the doorway, Rachel's face broke into the biggest smile. She rushed forward and pulled Grace into a hug, so tight it felt like she was trying to put all the broken pieces back together. "It's really you," Rachel whispered. "Oh, Grace, where have you been?" Grace's voice cracked. "I didn't know who else to call. I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of feeling small." Rachel pulled back and held Grace's face in her hands. Her voice was firm but loving. "No, honey, you didn't call for help. You called for a reminder of who you've always been. And I've got you. We're going to make them remember." Inside Grace's apartment, they spread the old photographs across the table. Rachel looked at each one carefully. Pictures of Grace at fundraising galas. Pictures of her shaking hands with the mayor. Pictures of her giving speeches. Pictures of a woman who once moved through the world with purpose and power. "Tell me something," Rachel said, opening her sketchbook. "When you walk into that wedding, how do you want them to see you?" Grace looked her straight in the eye. "I want them to see the woman they tried to erase, the woman they failed to destroy." Rachel smiled slowly. She grabbed her tablet and started sketching. Lines appeared, a dress taking shape, elegant shoulders, a flowing silhouette, strength and grace combined. "Rachel, I can't afford," Grace started to say. Rachel held up her hand. "Stop right there. Don't you dare. I'm not doing this for money. I'm doing this because women like you don't bow. Not today. Not ever. You hear me?" They work for hours. Rachel made phone calls to her contacts in Chicago. A dress was sent from her personal collection, jewelry pulled from her vault. A makeup artist and hairstylist were scheduled, every detail planned like a military operation. As the sun began to set, Rachel sat across from Grace and took her hands. "Listen to me," Rachel said softly. "When you walk into that place Saturday, they won't see a janitor. They won't see someone to laugh at. They will see a queen. Because that's what you are. That's what you've always been." Grace felt something stirring inside her, something she thought had died years ago. It wasn't just confidence. It was deeper than that. It was a truth of who she was rising back to the surface. The next few days passed in a blur. Rachel stayed with Grace, refusing to leave her side. They talked late into the night, about the past, about the pain, about the future. Rachel reminded Grace of stories she'd forgotten, like the time Grace raised $50,000 in one night for scholarship programs, like the time she stood up to city officials to protect a community center, like the time she changed a young girl's entire life with one conversation. "You didn't lose who you are, Grace," Rachel said one evening. "You just forgot for a little while." But forgetting isn't the same as losing. On Friday night, the night before the wedding, Grace stood in front of the mirror. Rachel had brought the dress. It hung on the door, waiting, black silk with subtle gold accents. Not flashy, not loud, just powerful. Grace touched the fabric gently. "What if I freeze up?" she whispered. "What if I get there and I can't do it?" Rachel came up behind her and put her hands on Grace's shoulders. "Then you look at yourself in the mirror, just like you're doing right now, and you remember your father's smile. You remember your mother's strength. You remember every person you helped, every life you changed, and you walk in there like you own the place. Because, baby, you're worth more than everyone in that room combined." That night, Grace barely slept. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her heart racing. Part of her wanted to back out. Part of her wanted to tear up that invitation and pretend it never happened. But another part of her, the part that had been quiet for so long, was wide awake now. And that part was ready. Saturday morning arrived. Rachel was up before Grace, already moving with purpose. "Today is your day," she announced, pulling open the curtains. "Today, Grace Anderson comes back." The makeup artist arrived at noon. The hairstylist came right after. Grace sat in the chair and watched in the mirror as they worked. Her face transformed, not with heavy makeup, but with careful, elegant touches that brought out her natural beauty. Her hair was styled up high, like a crown, sleek, regal, timeless. When it was time to put on the dress, Rachel helped her step into it. The silk slid over her skin like water. It fit perfectly, like it was made for her, because, in a way, it was. Rachel had designed it with Grace's old measurements in mind, knowing somehow that the woman she once knew was still there underneath all the pain. Grace looked at herself in the mirror, and for the first time in 7 years, she recognized a woman staring back at her. Tears filled Rachel's eyes. "There she is," she whispered. "There's my Grace." Grace turned around, the dress flowing with her. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Good," Rachel said firmly. "That means it matters. But don't let fear tell you what you're worth. You walk in there and you show them, not for revenge, not to be cruel, but because you deserve to take up space in this world." At 4:30 p.m., they got into the car. Rachel sat beside Grace, holding her hand the entire drive. As they pulled up to Rosewood Manor, with its grand entrance, its crystal chandeliers visible through the windows, its valet parking and red carpet, Grace took a deep breath. "Ready?" Rachel asked. Grace looked at the building, at all the luxury, at everything designed to make people like her feel small. "Yes," she said quietly. "I'm ready." The car door opened, and Grace stepped out into her new beginning. The moment Grace's heels touched the ground, something shifted in the air. It was like time slowed down. People turned. Conversation stopped. Champagne glasses froze halfway to lips. She stood there for just a moment, letting them look. The black silk dress moved gently in the breeze. The gold accents caught the afternoon light. Her posture was straight. Her head was high. Her face was calm. And then she walked. Slow, steady, purposeful, every step deliberate. The sound of her heels on the stone pathway echoed like a heartbeat. Click, click, click. She didn't rush. She didn't look around nervously. She didn't search for approval. She simply walked like she belonged there, because she did. Whispers started immediately. "Who is that?" someone asked. "Is she famous?" Another voice wondered. "I've never seen her before." Someone else said, "She must be someone important." Inside the venue, Brittany stood near the grand staircase in her wedding dress, laughing with friends. She was glowing, soaking in all the attention. This was her day, her moment, her victory. Then she felt something change. The energy in the room shifted. She turned around, and she saw Grace. Brittany's smile died on her face. Her eyes went wide. Her mouth fell open slightly. The blood drained from her cheeks. "No," she whispered. "No, that can't be." But it was. Grace continued walking through the crowd. People parted for her, without even realizing they were doing it. They made space, gave way, like something inside them recognized royalty when they saw it. David, the CEO, looked up from his phone. His eyes locked on Grace. He stood completely still, staring like he was seeing a ghost. Or maybe seeing clearly for the first time. Grace reached the center of the courtyard. The white roses, the string quartet, the ice sculptures, all of it beautiful, all of it expensive, all of it suddenly feeling very small compared to the presence of this one woman. Brittany forced herself to move forward. Her legs felt shaky. Her hands trembled, but she plastered on a smile and walked over, her bridesmaids following close behind. "Well," Brittany said, her voice higher than usual. "What a surprise. I didn't actually think you'd come." Grace turned to face her, a small, calm smile on her lips. "You invited me," she said simply. "It would have been rude not to show up." Brittany laughed nervously. Her eyes scanned Grace up and down, looking for something to criticize, something to mock. But there was nothing. You really dressed up for this," she managed to say. Grace tilted her head slightly. "Yes," she said softly. "I did." She paused, then added, "And looking at you, I see you did too." Another pause. "Though I suppose all this money still can't buy what really matters." A few people nearby gasped quietly. Someone covered their mouth to hide a smile. Brittany's face turned red. Her grip on her bouquet tightened until her knuckles went white. Before she could respond, an older gentleman stepped forward from the crowd. He had silver hair, kind eyes, and a distinguished look. He was staring at Grace like he'd seen a miracle. "Excuse me," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but are you Grace Anderson?" The entire courtyard went silent, completely silent. You could hear the fountain in the background, the rustling of leaves, someone's breath. Grace turned to face him. "Yes," she said clearly. "I'm Grace Anderson." The man's hand flew to his chest. "My God," he whispered. "I worked with your father. I was on the board of the Anderson Community Foundation. You ran that organization. You changed so many lives. Where have you been?" Gasps rippled through the crowd like waves. "Anderson Foundation?" someone whispered. "Wait, that Grace Anderson?" Another voice said quietly. "No way," someone else breathed. Brittany's legs nearly gave out. She grabbed onto a nearby chair to steady herself. Her breathing became quick and shallow. Her world was crumbling around her. She had tried to humiliate a woman who had once been a pillar of the community, a woman whose name was respected across the entire city. The older gentleman stepped closer and took Grace's hand in both of his. His eyes were shining with tears. "Your father was one of the finest men I ever knew," he said. "And your mother, she taught my daughter in elementary school, changed her life. I had no idea what happened to you. I'm so sorry we lost touch." Grace squeezed his hand gently. "Life took me down roads I never expected," she said softly. "But it didn't take away who I am." Around them, more people were putting the pieces together. Phones came out. Some were searching the name online. Others were whispering to their neighbors, sharing memories, making connections. The mood in the room completely changed. David walked over slowly. His face was serious. Tense. He looked at Brittany, then at Grace, then back at Brittany. "Brittany," he said quietly, his voice tight with controlled anger. "What exactly is going on here?" Brittany's mouth opened and closed. No words came out. She tried again. It was supposed to be just a joke," she stammered. "A joke," David repeated, his voice getting harder. "You tried to humiliate a woman who has done more for this community than most people in this room combined." "I didn't know," Brittany said weakly, tears starting to form. "I didn't know who she was." Grace stepped forward. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried across the entire space. "You didn't need to know who I was," she said calmly. "You just needed to treat me like a human being." The words hung in the air. Heavy, true, undeniable. "I didn't come here for revenge," Grace continued, looking around at all the faces watching her. "I didn't come to ruin anyone's day. I came to remind you, to remind everyone here, that dignity doesn't come from money. It doesn't come from status or titles or designer clothes. It comes from how you treat people, especially the ones you think don't matter." Somewhere in the back, someone started clapping. Just one person. Then another joined. Then another. Within seconds, the entire courtyard was filled with applause. People stood up. Some had tears in their eyes. Others nodded with respect. Finally understanding something important, Brittany couldn't take it anymore. Her face twisted with emotion. She dropped her bouquet and pushed through the crowd, running toward the building. Her bridesmaids hurried after her, their high heels clicking frantically against the stone. Grace closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she opened them again, she felt lighter, free. She had done what she came to do. Several guests approached her. Some remembered her from years ago. Others just wanted to shake her hand. A businessman said, "If you ever restart the foundation, I want to help. Here's my card." A woman added, "My company would love to sponsor your work." Grace smiled and accepted their cards graciously. "Maybe it's time," she whispered, looking up at the sky as if speaking to her parents. "Maybe it's finally time." When she turned to leave, the crowd parted once again. But this time, it wasn't because they thought she didn't belong. This time, they moved aside with respect, like making way for someone who mattered. Rachel was waiting by the car, arms crossed, leaning against the door with a proud smile. "So," she said, raising an eyebrow, "how do you feel?" Grace looked back one last time at the chandeliers, the flowers, the luxury, all the things that once made her feel worthless. Now they just looked empty. Pretty, but empty. She took a deep breath. It felt like the first real breath she'd taken in years. "You know what?" Grace said, her voice strong and clear. "This isn't enough. This was just the beginning." Rachel laughed and grabbed her hand. "That's my girl," she said. "Let's go build something so beautiful, so powerful, that no one will ever forget your name again." The car pulled away from Rosewood Manor. The sun was setting, painting the Chicago skyline in gold and orange, like the whole city was celebrating with her. Grace sat by the window, watching the world go by. In the reflection of the glass, she could see herself, not a janitor, not a broken woman, not someone who had been thrown away. She saw a woman who had been knocked down but never destroyed, a woman who still carried her crown, not on her head, but in her heart, a crown no one had given her, a crown no one could ever take away. And somewhere inside her, in a place that had been dark for so long, a light turned back on. Grace Anderson was home. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that your worth isn't determined by how others treat you, then share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, dignity is something you carry, not something anyone can give or take away.